I like the idea of working with Andie and Cary, and then just the idea of playing kind of this devilish. That's always fun. To play a really, really bad guy, and it seemed like when I met with these people, they were going to give me the freedom to explore and potentially go over the top and just have fun with it. So that was the appeal. It also was only 3 weeks. It was short and sweet, and it was in New York where I live, and so that was all pretty cool.
Well, it's interesting you used the phrase "over the top" because I don't know if you saw in this morning's New York Times, they praised your performance unabashedly, and they talked about how it was a quiet and controlled performance, and how that can be scarier than kind of being loud and over the top. And I'm curious if, and you've played heavy before, and those you've done the kind of uber menacing heavies, and so I'm kind of curious on changing it up whenever you play kind of a somewhat villainous role and deciding which is the right tack to take.
Well, I think it's hard to know. It's hard to know, and it's hard to know when you're on the right track or not. And I mean, you kind of rely on the director and stuff. But in this case, I kind of went with my gut, and when I decided that the thing that we came up with in the rehearsal for this, we had a few days before we started filming. We kind of sat around a table and read through it, and we came up with this dimension between myself and the other guy, Matt Dallas's character. We came up with this sort of thing where he would sort of be the muscle and the strong arm, and I would sort of kind of try to stay with kind of a quiet, menacing demeanor. Right. And once in a while I'd find moments where I would kind of flip out a little bit, but I tried to, and I'm glad the Times said that. I'm glad that somebody saw that somebody gave me that compliment. But because that was really my goal, like to kind of keep a quiet, kind of scary, creepy quality, but and then when it did become eruptive and big, it would even be scarier.
Do you adhere to, because you hear this sometimes, a lot of actors will talk about they try to find a hook of or find empathy with their character, no matter what kind of maybe morally questionable or just plain bad things the character may do. Actors a lot of times, sometimes they talk about trying to find a hook and empathy for that character, and I'm wondering, do you adhere to that, or sometimes the character is just lethally one way, and therefore, psychology might not be the number one factor in a character?
I think that it's hard to do that when you play a purely evil type of person. I don't think, and I really don't think that way. What I do try to do is find a little bit of humor, a little bit of, and with this, as I recall, the way he spoke sometimes, and when he got exasperated and frustrated, I wanted to sort of, hopefully I was going to try to get a laugh here and there, like the audience. So the audience would despise this guy, but despite that, kind of find him kind of a little bit funny here and there, and want to spend an hour and a half or however long the movie is watching. So I don't think it's possible to sympathize with a guy like that,
Well, I guess the kind of the opposite, or an opposite type of approach to character is the guy you played in Vacancy, who kind of is a wild character and kind of plays, the most demented, cheerfully demented kind of desk clerk who, uses kind of this facade of pleasantry, but is really just, reeling people in. It's just kind of this mastermind. Yeah.
There are similarities between the two. Both kind of squirrely and undersized bad guys. But one uses kind of this kind of cheerful, like weird uncle thing, and the other kind of is a little bit more crotchety and easily exasperated, and but there are similarities.
The disconnect there might be between filming those types of scenes that are, very versus when we see them, and are they as intense as the audience feels, or has it become more clinical and technical when you're filming kind of torture or violence scenes?
Well, in this case, it was more like it was the tension came from the sweltering heat that we were all experiencing, because it was really hot. I think it was last summer, early last summer we were filming this, and it was really, really hot up there. There was no air conditioning. So it wasn't so much, because everybody's used to it. Everybody knows the blood is makeup, and the guns are, like rubber replicas of guns, and, so it's not tense that way, but it was tense because the crew was exhausted and hot, and we were all kind of at our wit's end because of the just the low budget nature of things. It's it's just really hard. So the tension was more out of let's get this thing done, get this day done, and not so much like that the situation that's being played out in the movie. I mean, it was a little bit delicate when the little girl was on the set, because we didn't want her to be. So we kind of tried to, that was a little bit weird, having a little kid around with the guns and stuff. So.
You mentioned earlier about the whole, the majority of the film being kind of this one set, being in this one location kind of thing. And you come from the theater. A lot of people who may know you from film may not know this, but you come from theater. And
right.
You've done, every now and then, you've been in films where, they might have a setup, but, then a good chunk of them will take place in this one location. Obviously, this film, vacancy on a certain level, even, something as far back as career opportunities,
right.
Which has this long section inside this, overnight convenience store.
That's right.
And so I'm wondering, as a theater person, those types of opportunities you really do, like, obviously theater is totally different from film, but when it gets to these kind of one location portions, there seems to be a little more freedom as an actor, I would think. You're right.
I hadn't thought about that. All three of those films that you mentioned, all three of them, those two others, and As Good as Dead. The other thing they have in common is that because they were logistically sort of easier, so to speak, to shoot because they all take place in one set. There was a lot more time to explore and to play around. I remember with Career Opportunities, we went into that store. It was actually a Target. It was actually a real Target store set, down in Georgia. And we went in there, the director and I, and the other actors and I went in there a couple of weeks early, and because we could only use the stuff that was in the store as props. That was the deal I think they made with Target. And so we rehearsed. We came up with ideas and different bits. With Vacancy, they built that hotel on a soundstage. It was the soundstage that they shot a lot of Wizard of Oz. And they built that entire hotel set inside and out on a soundstage. So, when you walked on that set, you were there. You were inside that hotel, and somehow, for some reason, that does give you a lot of freedom. To, at least for me, it gave me, I felt with Vacancy and As Good as Dead. I mean, granted they were bad guys, and that's always fun to do, but. I felt a great sense of freedom, and the openness to explore different ideas to make the characters more interesting and fun.
In the early part of your film career, you did 3 films in, I guess, a 2-year period with Oliver Stone.
Right.
And I'm kind of wondering, as coming from the theater and then going into kind of the Oliver Stone School of Filmmaking at that age and early on in your career, what did you take away from those 3 consecutive films that you did, in that area?
Well, it was. I learned a great deal. Particularly from the first film I did was Born on the 4th of July, where I was pretty terrified because I was working. The first scene that I had was was with Tom Cruise. This long dialogue scene.
A very theater-like sequence almost. It's just you guys talking.
Yeah, it was. It was very. It was a long scene for. It was a 4 or 5 page scene. And the funny thing is, with all my theater experience and stuff, I came and I was doing another movie at that time. I was doing 2 movies at the same time. I was doing a movie called Little Monsters, which was a kids movie and I was playing a 2,000-year-old boy, and I had tons of makeup but I was flying. I was juggling my life from North Carolina, we were filming that, to Dallas, where we were filming Born on the 4th of July, and I finished on the Little Monsters set, at 7 o'clock, and I got on a plane that night, and I didn't memorize the scene because I was exhausted, and so and which is sort of unacceptable, especially in the theater you have to know your lines, and I got there first day of filming on the set. And Cruise, he was all set. He knew his lines, and because it's a long scene, you should come in prepared. But I was holding on to my script, and that did not go over well at all with Oliver Stone. He was very angry with me. And I was young. I mean, I was a kid, and he was, we went through the scene once, and he kind of, gestured for me to come over to the back of the set, and said, go back and take 10 minutes and come back and I don't want to see that script in your hands. And so I went out there and crammed this scene, but I learned so much from that experience, and also just from working with that guy, not only as an actor, but later on in my career as a director. Watching him run a set, it's amazing. I think he's, whether or not you're a fan of his work or of the movies he makes, the guy's a brilliant director. He's really something to watch.
And what was it like 15 years later, because you're in World Trade Center,
right?
To come back, obviously, where now you're obviously more prepared when you get on the set.
Yeah.
You've done directing by that time, and so I'm curious, when you got to World Trade Center, had Oliver Stone's directing approach, had he changed any, or was it still the same?
Slightly, pretty much exactly the same. He was slightly more mellow, with age, but he still pretty much the same. And he the thing that was exactly the same was his approach. He knows exactly what it is he wants. He's getting at something, and it's in his head, and he knows what it is, and everybody just stands back and lets him do it. He's of all the movies I made, 60 some odd movies in television. I've never worked with anyone who I thought of as a director, a film director, who I looked at as a true artist conceptually, like Oliver Stone. He knows. He has a picture in his head of what he wants, and you can tell by watching him that he knows what that is, and he's going to get it. And I was just, for the first time, I remember the sensation of showing up on that set first time in a long time, being really nervous. The same way I was when I was younger, on the doors and Born on the 4th of July, because he's an intimidating guy, and it's when you work again an Oliver Stone movie, it's like probably like Scorsese or Woody Allen or one of those guys. It's an experience. It's like, it's an event. Whether no matter how how you look at his what your view of his work or whatever, it's big. It's big.
Right. And here's a fun question. I don't know if anyone's pointed this connection out, or maybe every once in a while it gets pointed out, but you played a young Jack Nicholson in Iron Week. You played his character, the young man.
Yeah. And
then 5 years later, you play the young kid in Hoffa who pretty much assassinates Jack Nicholson.
Right.
I'm curious on what was that kind of like. Granted, you have very brief interaction with Nicholson, but I guess I'll ask this: was he aware that you had played him as a young man?
Oh yeah, yeah, he knew that. Well, Iron Week was interesting on many levels for me because Iron Week was my first film, and I'd been doing a lot of stage work. I was 23 23 or 24 at the time, and I was playing, a 14-year-old kid in that movie, and it was terrifying. I went back. I was a college student at the State University of New York at Albany, and so my first scene of Ironweed, the first scene was on the street that I lived when I was in college, which was pretty crazy and surreal, and being in a movie with Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep, it was pretty amazing. And I didn't work with Jack in those scenes because I was playing him, but I did meet him. He had to approve who was playing him. So when they brought me, after I had auditioned for the movie with the director, they brought me in to meet Jack, so he could have approval over who was playing him as a young guy. And then with Hoffa, we talked a little bit about that, about how I played him, and Jack is kind of he does it. He's not a real sociable guy or social guy when he's working. At least not with the guys who are playing his killer. So we didn't talk a whole lot. There was one funny thing where, well, it was not. It wasn't at the time. It wasn't very funny, but we were filming in this out in the boondocks outside of Illinois at that truck stop, and all the trailers and the trucks were parked way in the back, sort of in a wooded area, and they came knocking on my door, and I was fast asleep. It was after lunch. They came knocking on my door. I said, "They're ready. They need you, and you got to report to makeup." And I ran out of my room, and I didn't see there was some scaffolding with some 2x4s. And because it was so wooded, it was kind of camouflaged. I couldn't see, and I ran right into one of the 2x4s, the end of one of the 2x4s. It was like a punch. It was like a punch in the face, and knocked me down, and kind of like dazed me, and ended up having a huge black eye,
right?
A big welt on my eye, and they had to hold up the filming, and Jack was really upset because he wanted to go to. He was supposed to catch a flight to the Bulls-Lakers game. I think that was the championship game, and he was, and I was pretty mortified. It was no fault of my own, but I was mortified that I had to, that Jack was really upset because I was holding a production.
Well, and I got to ask about one film. It's a personal favorite of mine, and we've been talking here about working with these veterans and adults, these big pillars of the acting and filmmaking community. But then I'm wondering what it's like when you work with actual people of your generation, and I'm talking about A Midnight Clear, with Keith Gordon film and Ethan Hawke and Peter Berg, and I just think it's one of the lost gems of the 90s. And so I'm curious about what's the energy like when you're working with people of your generation and you're working on a project, you're all in the same kind of mindset.
I agree with you that's kind of a forgotten movie because it was made somewhat independently before the age of independent film. It was made in 1990, and it was kind of just before that whole film festival independent spirit idea came to be what it is today. And I think that's part of the reason it's kind of got lost because the company that released it didn't really know how to market it, and it was somewhat dark. But it was an extraordinary experience making that movie. We all lived together for a number of months filming it, and we rehearsed for a number of weeks beforehand, and we all got really close, and just we all sort of took on the roles that we were playing, in our own real life kind of platoon.
Right.
And it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. I loved it. I loved the memory of that of that film. We got really, really close. Ethan and I, met on that film, and have been really close friends ever since. I consider him one of my best friends, if not my best friend, and collaborator. And our sons are a month apart, and we live very close together, and in the city, and we stay in touch. So that was, that's
great.
That's something that I cherish. And the other thing about that was the thing that I remember about making a movie is toward the end of the film, I got news that my father, who I hadn't seen in a number of years, was on his deathbed, and I remember going to the producers and saying, I gotta go, I gotta leave, because I gotta go and see to my dad. He's up in upstate New York, and we were shooting in Utah. And producers, they said, okay, if you have to, and I said, yeah, I have to. I got to go. So they had to redo the schedule and stuff, and I left. And I remember the next morning, I filmed a scene in the morning, and then I was going to take a flight. And there was I had to take a car, to the airport, and the car was waiting for me, and all the guys were standing there, and each one of them, gave me a big hug as I got into the car, and said, take care of yourself, and we'll look forward to seeing you. But it just meant so much to me that they were there, standing, sort of lined up there in this procession, and that's a very dear memory in my life.
Well, before I let you go, I'll just ask, what do you have coming up acting-wise, and more importantly, what do you directing-wise? Do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, I do actually. I have the next movie that I'm acting in is called Janie Jones. It's with Abigail Breslin and Elizabeth Shue and Alessandro Nivola, and I play a drummer in a rock and roll band. And that's coming out. It just premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. I think it's coming out. I think Weinstein Company's releasing it in December.
And do you play the drums? Obviously, you're known for your, playing a musician in the Doors. Do you play the drums here?
I do, actually. I do play the drums in real life, and I played, for many, many years in a band called the Niagaras in New York, but they knew that I was a drummer, and it's a good thing to have somebody who really plays to play the drums, because there's a lot of performance scenes in the movie. So I actually played the drums in the movie, and it's a really fun character, and it's a really nice movie. And let's see, and then in January I start rehearsals with Marissa Tomei off Broadway. The new group is doing a revival of Marie and Bruce, which is a play by Wallace Shawn.
Right.
And so she and I are doing that. That'll open at the Acorn Theater off Broadway in March. And directing-wise, I'm doing in May. I'm going to direct a movie called Like Sunday, Like Rain, which I wrote, and it's going to star Jenna Malone, who's a really fine young actress, and I got a pilot in the works that I wrote for television called Me Frank, which is I like to think of it as a workplace comedy where the workplace is Frank Whaley. It's a show about where the main character is me, Frank.
And I'm assuming you'll be playing yourself.
Yes, I hope so. I'm hoping they'll let me do that. Yeah, I mean, I actually toyed with the idea of somebody else playing Frank, but I think I'm better suited.